Hey guys, what's up? And today I will do an album review on Muse's Origins of Symmetry from 2001. Now, I am going to continue to have my break from the Eminem album review series that I had been running for the past couple of months. And this will be a Muse album review. Out of all things, it will be a Muse album review. And the reason why that I would suddenly do a review on a Muse album is because Muse is actually one of the earlier bands that I had discovered in my lifetime. Alright, anyway, so where did I last left off? I think I told you that Muse is one of the earlier bands that I had discovered when I started going into actual music. You know, when I was 9 years old, 10 years old, I was into pop music so much. And then I discovered Eminem, and then I discovered Coldplay, and then I discovered Gorillaz and the Black Keys, and then I discovered Muse and Arcade Fire, and then a bunch of classic rock stuff, and then Radiohead, and then everything. So yeah. This is one of the earlier bands I had put my hands on, you know. So anyway, Muse, if you don't know them, they are a rock band from UK, a trio. And the vocalist is Matt Bellamy, the guitarist is Chris, and the drummer is Dom. Shut up, please. Alright, anyway, so their sound is famous for being super overblown, dramatic, and also dystopian because they are actually really politically conscious, and they always portray their music in such an Orwellian way. And that's also one of the strengths of the band Muse, to be honest. The vocalist Matt Bellamy's vocals are really sickening and opera-like, almost like he almost sounds like a Freddie Mercury wannabe, but it's not a bad thing. You know, he still has his own style. And Chris's guitars are always really fat and saturated, and he plays the bass mostly, while Matt plays the main melody, I guess. I know nothing about guitars, so spare my life. And the drums, Doms are on the drums, and the drums are a little bit predictable, but still, Dom isn't a bad drummer at all. So, yeah. The reason why I picked Origins of Symmetry, because this is perhaps the most accessible Muse album, and the most Muse-sounding Muse album that is actually good. However, I don't know if this album is the best, or Absolution is the best, or Black Holes and Revelations is the best, but, Origins of Symmetry, it's one of the best Muse albums. And also one of the reasons why I picked some of their earlier albums is because Muse kind of went down, had a downfall since The Resistance, basically. You know, all their albums sounded pretty sappy and sloppy and really predictable and drab after The Resistance. So you know, their old albums are definitely better than the new ones. And the reason why that their newer albums are not as good as the old ones is because of their commonly used by Muse chromatic chord change. And the chord change, the really cheap and predictable chord changes, is one of the weaknesses of the band, and also the just the sappy, overblown, dramatic verses and choruses that aren't necessary, to be honest. But nonetheless, this album, Origins of Symmetry, is a good album because it has sticky and compelling rock tunes that also gives a futuristic Orwellian feel to it, and I like it. So the first track of the album is Newborn, and it has these ominous xylophone passages. And then Matt kicks in with his vocals that are quiet and emotional and almost kind of tortured. And then Chris comes in with the fat and saturated bass, and after that, all the instrumentals kind of meld into one another and create this harmony of chaos and order at the same time. And that's also one of the things I really like about this track. And wow, this track is really dramatic, but not in a pretentious way. It really has some real emotions behind it. The second track is Bliss, which has a really solid bass riff, and it's actually kind of catchy.
Everything about you is how I'd wanna be. Your freedom comes naturally.
And the chorus is surprisingly almost stargazing and entrancing. And this track really keeps the album on the pace because it doesn't slow down at all, and it still has the energy from Newborn. The third track, Space Dementia, is also one of the more special tracks from the band Muse. And at first you have these fiery, burning verses that are really angry and painful, and then suddenly you hit the chorus and it gets really weird, disorienting, and quirky. And I also really love the watery pianos that runs throughout the track. And the way that the chord progressions keep changing and twisting reminds me of the last phase, the last stage of Radiohead's magnum opus, Paranoid Android, and I'm actually liking it. And then the fourth track is Hyper Music. Man, sounds like it's gonna be a banger, and indeed it is a banger. Although the intro is a little bit overblown, a little bit too wacky, a little bit too overboard, maybe, but still. After the intro, we have these energetic ascending guitars that are really catchy, and then we hit the verses and the choruses, and it's actually a pretty good song. Not bad at all. And then we have Plug In Baby. One of the most iconic Muse tracks ever, and it also has a pretty amazing music video. You know, good music videos are pretty rare from Muse. If you know Muse, you know their music videos aren't that good, to be honest. But this is pretty good. This is pretty good, I'll say. It's one of the better ones, not the best, but one of the better ones. And man, the bass riff is super iconic, and it's almost as iconic as Radiohead's Creep. Yeah, I know I'm gonna make a lot of Radiohead and Muse comparisons on this video, so don't get mad. But still, Radiohead and Muse, two very different bands, but a lot of features about these two bands are really comparable. So, yeah, and on Plug In Baby, we have a soaring chorus, so plug in baby! And it's just one of the biggest and grandest and sing-alongable Muse songs. Just imagine Matt Bellamy singing this on stage while the whole crowd singing along with it. It's an epic scenery, to be honest. And it reminds me of Coldplay's music too, because Coldplay also make a lot of songs that are meant to be sing-along by the crowd during an epic live performance. Anyway, the next track is the dystopian and dark 7-minute long Citizen Erased. And that is a straight up Orwellian reference. from 1984. I don't know why I'm so thirsty. This bottle of water is 2 days old. And I really enjoy the cold and apocalyptic chords on this track, and the choruses are super painful and tortured. And I also kind of like the quiet part towards the end with the ear ringings that goes round and round your head. It's really, I guess, unsettling, but at the same time, it's a really smart way to end a track. And of course, the track ultimately ends up with a romantic part that just feels really final, and I love it. And wow, this track has a lot of energy too. For one moment, and then we have micro cuts, which has these police sirens, at least that's what I heard, subtly playing in the background, and the whole track feels like an aftermath of an apocalypse. But this track is actually kinda underwhelming and underwritten, to be honest, because Matt Bellamy has his awkward falsetto everywhere on this track, and his falsetto is also kind of like filtered on this track, so it just sounds really awkward. It sounds really disconnected from Matt, the vocalist himself, in a bad way. And the chorus is kind of cheaply written, to be honest, so I'm just gonna pass that track. And then we have Screenager, which is a little bit underwhelming compared to the first half of the album, of course, and this is basically a semi-Latin flavored balladish rock track, I guess. And it's not a bad track, but it's just eh. And then we have Dark Shines, which has some pretty good instrumentals, and mainly because it has some groovy guitars, and it's like a slow jam.
So be mine.
And the chorus is eh. And then up next we have Feeling Good, which is technically a Nina Simone cover, but it's actually written by another guy named Anthony Newley and another person. And it's actually not bad. It's a pretty nice rock flavored rendition of the iconic song Feeling Good. And I say rock flavored because, like, this song is meant to be sung in a soul, jazz, R&B way, but still, Muse uses these rock instrumentals and rock music's features to recreate this track, and this makes this track rock flavored.
And I'm feeling good. Fish in the sea, you know how I feel.
And then the second last track is Megalomania, which is more moody and slow, a little bit lavishing and luxurious, and also intoxicating and sickening, and it's not bad. It's not bad of a track. And the album ends off with Futurism, which is kind of like The Tourist from the OK Computer, except it's not as good as The Tourist, to be honest, but still, it's still a very good track because it feels really final. It really brings on the finality, and it still has a twist of uncertainty, although it brings finality. And it's like the track is telling you that, yep, even though you've listened to this album to its entirety, it doesn't mean that you can change the fact that blah 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 happened, blah 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 will happen, and yep, it's just going on. It goes on, and you can never do anything about that. And this is what this track feels like, and that's actually kind of smart because it feels the end of the world without it being actually the end of the world, and that's one of the best features of this track, in my opinion. But still, overall, it's a good album. It's a good album. Not super great, but it's actually kind of good. And this album is really theatrical and really ambitious. Although it's not as intellectual as some of other bands that are in the same line of genre, but still it has some really nice instrumentals, really nice sound effects, really good mixing, and the lyrics are actually not bad, and every song has its own distinct texture on this album, which is also one of the best things about this album. And it's just really impressive how Muse melds genres of space rock, opera rock, a little bit of punk rock, a little bit of prog rock together to form this piece of dystopian and dramatic and just powerful piece of music. And it's it is what it is, you know. It may grow on me, however, but I don't know. It's not that great of an album again, but I appreciate it for what it is. So the worst track is unfortunately Micro Cuts, and the best track is tough pick, but you know what? I'll go with the mainstreamers and say it's Plug-in Baby. Although it is as good as Newborn and Citizen Erased, in my opinion. So, I am giving Muse's Origins of Symmetry an 8 out of 10. So, have you listened to this album? From 1 to 10, how much would you rate it? Like if you like it, and subscribe if you want more.